why, if you take steroids, might you end up still being a big fat loser? Or maybe not even being big, maybe just being a fat loser, period. You know, you need to have a lot of habits in place to make all this stuff work, whether it's trying to get leaner or whether it's trying to get big and strong. There's some things that you need to have in place, some disciplines you need to have in place. Obviously, you have to have your training in place, and you're going to need sleep and all these different things. I know a lot of people that use TRT, and I know a lot of people that are on steroids, and they don't have the build that they want at all. And I'm not talking about the people that have a warped image of themselves and are like, yeah, I still want to lose 5 pounds of body fat. I'm not talking about those kinds of things. I'm talking about people still being way out of shape and taking performance enhancing drugs. You know, you oftentimes hear people say that they used to do them. And that's a good sign that those people didn't get out of them what they were looking for. And so you have to have some disciplines intact. Steroids won't do everything for you, but I can tell you what they can do for you. I've been on performance enhancing drugs since I was 25 years old, and I'm 48. I guess you'd say like almost half my life. There really hasn't been a lot of off periods. You know, back in the day when Arnold was taking them, you could see video evidence of, you know, Arnold like being on clearly, and then clearly probably not being on, you know, being off more than likely, where he just looks small for Arnold. You know, his physique looks bad in comparison to what Arnold was able to build on Olympia stage in the 70s and 80s. You're still going to have some sort of diet that resembles something leaning more towards a diet that is going to help you recomp, though, than anything. Like you can't just be eating like a standard American diet. You already have a shit build, and then you take steroids and you get jacked. It does not work that way. It can add more muscle to that frame, which I've seen happen a lot at SuperTraining. A lot of the guys at SuperTraining, they just got like bigger and more red and more bloated. Rounder faces, but you didn't really see like a huge improvement in physique. Every once in a while, someone would look better because they did add more muscle mass. Like they literally just added like, I don't know, 5 pounds of fat and maybe 10 pounds of muscle over the course of a year or two. And yeah, that can look better on some people, but for the most part, people just look bloated. The strength gains that you get from steroids too, they're not as crazy as you might think. Like, and I've mentioned this many times before, they don't like continually build up. So you play your steroid card, and that's the card that you play. But that's the same as like your lifting card. You know, you play your lifting card at a certain point. You're 17 or 16 or 15, whatever it is when you first stepped into the gym. And you have like a year effing around, and you have like a couple years where you're training pretty hard. But after like 4 or 5 years, your luck runs out. You don't make any more progress from that point ever. And people hate talking about that, but that's the truth. I have pinned it down to 7 years. You're not going to make any more progress after 7 years. Boom, you're done. I do think that maybe that could be elongated with better coaching, training techniques, and performance enhancing drugs. Maybe. Even like, you know, grab a hold of Michael Phelps and just talk to some of these really, really high level people. And they will tell you of a time when they made improvements that were just absolutely ridiculous. And it was more than likely in their early stages, not in their later stages. That's just the way that it works. But you don't take a steroid and then continually get better and better. What it can do, though, is it can assist you with gaining muscle mass in a lot faster fashion than you normally would be able to gain muscle mass. The problem, there's a bunch of problems, but a big problem is this. One is you have to get adjusted to a new body weight. So if you're taking steroids and you're not going to really be on much of a diet, and you're just going to like kind of eat and you're trying just to like be big and strong, well, you'll have to recalibrate your body to being 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds heavier. That is going to decrease your strength to weight ratio, even though the steroids are going to make you stronger. It more than likely is going to decrease your body's ability to move around its own body weight in space. You're also going into a category where you're now producing large amounts of force with a less of an ability for acceleration and less of an ability for deceleration. And what you end up with is you end up being a person injured very easily. You can end up in Snap City very easily because your ligaments and tendons, they take there's such a lag time with your ligaments and tendons. So let's hypothetically say that rather than injecting you with, a testosterone, let's just say that we literally injected you with like strength. If that happened for you, that might be great. You might be able to lift a little bit more. You might notice a little bit, some strength gains here and there. But if you really start maxing out, you are in a more compromised position than you ever would have been if you were natural. You are in a very dangerous zone because it's going to be very easy to tear a tendon. The tendons take much, much longer. They think the lag time is like 6 months, but I think it's way longer than that even. So they don't usually catch up, and they have to be trained with more specifics than you would think. And usually those specifics entail doing things that a sprinter would do to create stiffer tendons. And usually those things are derived from kind of body weight exercises like depth jumps and things like that. There are coaches out there that are smart enough to have athletes doing those things. And you start to think about people like Josh Bryant, and you're like, Josh Bryant has people excel and decel. Wait a second. Josh Bryant does like for his big guys to jump. So, someone like that is smart enough to recognize some of these deficiencies that you can run into. There's guys like Matt Wenning. Matt Wenning also understands that, okay, you're putting on some muscle tissue and you're getting strong. Cool. That's great. You now went from being able to bench, 405 to now you can bench 455. That's great. But you're going to blow something right out if you're not in shape, if you're not in condition. And so Matt has derived this idea of utilizing general physical preparedness type of work before workouts to kind of pre-fatigue the body and to pre-fatigue you for your workout. Now, at first, you when you go to work out, you're weaker. But when you first start to work out that way and you utilize that technique, you're not as strong because you have depleted the body of glycogen. You have depleted the body of some of its reserves and some of its energy. And you basically got like a little bit of a pump going, and you might be a little bit weaker during your workout. Over time, though, it just becomes the warm up. Again, when you're bringing up some of the general, you're bringing up everything. You're bringing up your conditioning, and you're going to assist away from people getting hurt. And then when you have your guys doing their 400-meter intervals, they're going to be more prepared for them, much like what we see with what Matt Wenning has done with lifting, and much like we've seen Josh Bryant's done with some of his athletes, is this idea of like having them be conditioned because they're going to build so much strength when they're going to be considering performance enhancing drugs. The other thing to consider is just the diet. Like Chris Bumstead supposedly ate like 1,200 calories for like a month, or maybe it was like 1,600 calories for like a month or 6 weeks or something wild like that. Not only did he do that, but he also was doing cardio and he was also training. If you ever seen Chris Bumstead training, he trains very hard, trains with a lot of intensity, he trains with a good amount of frequency. If he's got to have meticulous diet and he is taking a lot of stuff to win the Olympia year in and year out, every single year, and he's doing cardio every day, then that means if you want to be in shape and you want to look like something and you want to be something, then you better work your ass off when you're on steroids. It seems like a lot of people discredit when someone takes steroids. They're like, oh, well, he's on steroids. Let's say that we learned that Kobe Bryant was on steroids his whole basketball career. Does that change the fact that he stayed after the game and shot free throws and three-pointers? It doesn't for me. Maybe there's people out there go, oh my God, I never saw it coming. Almost everybody is on something, whether it's a blood pressure medication or they have a caffeine addiction. The idea that you're going to take steroids and like turn superhuman, or the idea that you're going to take steroids and peptides and turn superhuman, you're kind of living a pipe dream because you still have to have some disciplines. Now, again, there are things there are some of these GLP-3s and some things coming down the pipeline that might blow up some of what I just said for some people. But I also know people that are eating right through these GLP-1, 2s, and 3s and having hardly any success with weight loss and all these different things. So the point in this video is, if you are considering, if you're on the bubble, you're like, I want to go get TRT. You know, I want to talk to somebody and learn about this, and like, I want to hop on. You know, you can use Merrick Health. That's the one I always recommend to people. They're a supporter of the Power Project, and I will support them back every single time. They have people that will interpret your blood work for you, and they can assist you with every single step of the way. It isn't cheap, but it is something that you can utilize, and you're not just try to score some steroids from somebody at the gym. You do have to have some habits intact, and I'm not saying that to try to make you think that I have habits that are like so intact that they're amazing and that you should look up to me for that or anything. And I'm not trying to say that because the habits I have intact are, it's just things that I enjoy, it's things I like to do. But if I said I worked on pull-ups, I worked on mobility, I worked on a treadmill, I did sprints, I did weighted walks, I did, A, B, C, D, and E all last year in an attempt to get faster, then they would think that that's some crazy discipline too, right? But it's not really crazy discipline. I just like doing a lot of that stuff. I just have always been attracted to movement, just like someone might be attracted to reading. I don't read. I don't like to read stuff. The most stuff that I read is it's an unfortunate thing, but the most stuff that I read is probably just from like social media, the little text that's on the Instagram stuff. That's about as much as I read. So for me, it would take a lot of motivation, a lot of grit for me to, sit down and read a book. But it's not my cup of tea. And so that's something that I'm trying to promote often, and something I'm trying to teach often, is that if you find stuff that you really enjoy and find stuff that you really like, then it doesn't have to be so laborious. It doesn't have to be feel so difficult or so hard all the time. But if you think that you're going to take steroids and be jacked and tan out of nowhere, it's not going to happen like that. It's still, there still has to be a certain amount of lifting that goes on. There's got to be a certain amount of training that goes on. Even for the guys at SuperTraining that were like big and fat, at least they had like a good amount of muscle on them. Guys that maybe, took some stuff and they kind of, reaped the benefits of getting a little stronger. And maybe they didn't have a physique that looked like Stan Efferding or anything crazy like that. But they got themselves stronger. They got themselves a little bit bigger. People are still doing that via, consuming, large amounts of protein. They're still doing that via making sure that they are recovering from their workouts. And they're still doing that with working out, like working out diligently, working out hard. A lot of people that take performance enhancing drugs, hopefully they all understand, like, this is an opportunity to load the body and take advantage of an opportunity, because you're in an anabolic state. You're in a state where it's easier for you to gain muscle mass now. So you might as well have protein muscle synthesis happen 3 different ways for you. And 3 different ways it's going to happen is 1, by taking steroids, 2, by eating protein, and 3, by breaking down protein. So now you got protein muscle synthesis going on multiple times a day. But if you're not stimulating it through eating protein, you're not stimulating it through lifting, then it will only be stimulated through that one pathway of taking steroids. And that won't be enough to make you look a lot better. You'll have to be on some sort of plan that leans towards some sort of recomping style diet, some sort of bodybuilding-esque diet. And maybe it doesn't have to be strict for you to get to 20% body fat and to have, a pretty decent chest and quads, and that might be fine. You might want to sit right there or go to 16% or 15% body fat. But even those body fat percentages, they take dedication and they take time. Strength is never a weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.